Let me share something fascinating about laziness. It's the most expensive habit you'll ever have. Surprising, isn't it? Most people believe that laziness helps them conserve energy, effort, and time, but here's the reality. Laziness is costing you everything that truly matters. Over the past 40 years, I've studied both success and failure. I've seen people rise from nothing to everything, and I've watched others lose everything they once had. And here's what I've learned. Laziness isn't just a habit, it's a disease. And like any disease, if left untreated, will eventually destroy you. Let me introduce you to what I call the laziness tax, a concept most people never even consider. Every time you choose inaction over action, you're not just missing the opportunity in front of you, you're paying a price on your future. I recall meeting a young man in Houston, talented, full of potential. He told me, I know what I need to do. I just can't seem to make myself do it. I asked him one simple question: how much is that costing you? That's the first principle in overcoming laziness. You must recognize its true cost, not just in terms of money, but in lost dreams, wasted potential, and missed opportunities that may never return. Now, let me introduce you to what I call the 4 destroyers of laziness. These aren't just techniques, they're principles that have transformed thousands of lives. If you're serious about breaking free from laziness, these are the weapons you need. The first destroyer is what I call painful awareness. You have to force yourself to see clearly and painfully what laziness is robbing you of. Not just today, but tomorrow, next month, next year, and even 5 years down the road. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to be lazy when you're not thinking about the consequences? Interesting, isn't it? We often separate our present choices from their future consequences. That's why the second destroyer of laziness is what I call immediate action. Now, here's something fascinating about laziness. It vanishes the moment you take action. Not tomorrow, not later, not when you feel like it, right now. But do you know what most people do? They wait for motivation. They tell themselves, I'll start when I feel ready. Let me share something profound with you. Readiness is a myth. It's not motivation that leads to action, it's action that creates motivation. I was teaching this principle at a seminar in Dallas when a gentleman approached me afterward. He said, I've been waiting 20 years to feel ready. I asked him one simple question: how's that working out for you? Isn't that interesting? 20 years of his life spent waiting for a feeling that only action could create. Let me introduce you to something I call the 5-second rule. The moment you feel an impulse to act on a goal, you must physically move within 5 seconds or your brain will shut it down. Not 5 minutes, not 5 hours, 5 seconds. You see, your brain is like a security system. It's designed to protect you from anything it perceives as risky or uncomfortable. And change, growth, action, your brain often sees these as threats. But here's what's remarkable about action. It reveals strengths and resources you never even knew you had. Isn't that fascinating? When you're stuck in laziness, you can't see your true capabilities. But the moment you take action, new possibilities begin to appear. I remember speaking with a successful entrepreneur in Chicago. He told me, saying, Ron, for years I believed I didn't have what it takes. Then one day I just started. And you know what I discovered? Everything he needed was already within him. He just couldn't see it while he was stuck in laziness. That brings us to the third destroyer of laziness, momentum management. Most people don't fully grasp the power of momentum. They believe success comes from isolated actions, but that's not true. Success is built on consecutive actions. Let me share something I call the momentum miracle. When you take action consistently, something incredible happens. Your actions begin generating their own energy. Isn't that fascinating? But most people never reach this stage because they stop too soon. They take one action, then another, maybe a third, and then they pause. They congratulate themselves, take a break, and that's exactly when laziness creeps back in. I once met a man in New York who built an empire worth hundreds of millions. I asked him for his secret. He told me, I made a rule early in my career: never stop when you're tired, stop when you're done. Now, isn't that interesting? The fourth destroyer of laziness is environmental control. Here's something profound. Laziness thrives in certain environments. Think of it like a plant. If you provide the right conditions, it grows. But if you change those conditions, it withers and dies. Let me introduce you to something I call the lazy zone. Any environment that makes laziness easy and action difficult. Most people spend their entire lives trapped in this zone, then wonder why they can't overcome laziness. Here's something fascinating. The most successful people I've ever met all understood this principle. They intentionally designed environments where laziness felt uncomfortable and taking action became second nature. I was teaching this concept in Seattle when a woman approached me afterward. She said, I've been trying to beat laziness using willpower alone. I told her, that's like trying to sail against the wind by blowing into your own sails. You see, willpower alone isn't enough. You need what I call environmental power, creating a space where laziness feels out of place and action becomes natural. Now, let me share with you something crucial, the 7 costs of laziness. These aren't just abstract ideas. They're real, measurable consequences you face every time you choose comfort over growth. The first cost is what I call time erosion. Most people assume time is neutral, that it doesn't favor one side or the other. But here's something profound. Time always favors action over laziness. Isn't that fascinating? When you're lazy, time becomes your enemy. It doesn't pause. It doesn't wait. It doesn't care about excuses. Every minute spent in laziness is a minute working against you, not for you. I remember speaking with a man in Miami who told me, I'm waiting for the right time to start my business. I asked him, while you're waiting, do you know what's happening? His competition was already building their businesses. The market was shifting. Opportunities are slipping away. Time isn't neutral. It's charging you interest on your laziness. The second cost of laziness is what I call opportunity blindness. Opportunities don't just randomly appear. They reveal themselves to those who are already in motion. When you're stuck in laziness, you become blind to opportunities. Isn't that interesting? Let me introduce you to something I call the action lens. It's the clarity that only comes when you're actively moving forward. Think of driving a car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights allow, but that's enough to complete the entire journey. Yet most people want to see the whole path before they take the first step. They crave guarantees. They demand certainty. But here's what's fascinating. Certainty is the enemy of opportunity. The only certainty you need is this: action will always defeat laziness. The third cost of laziness is what I call character erosion. And here's something remarkable. Every time you choose laziness over action, you're not just losing time, you're losing something even more valuable. You're losing pieces of your character. Character isn't built in the big defining moments. It's shaped in the small, everyday choices. Choosing action over laziness, again and again. Every time you hit snooze, every time you say, I'll do it tomorrow, every time you take the easy route, you're making a choice about the person you're becoming. I was teaching this principle in Philadelphia when a young man asked me, how do I build strong character? I told him something that changed his life. I said, character is built one decision at a time, and laziness is character suicide. The fourth cost of laziness is what I call momentum murder. Success isn't just about what you do, it's about what you do consistently. Laziness doesn't just slow progress, it destroys momentum. And here's what's fascinating about momentum. It's harder to build than it is to maintain. Let me introduce you to something I call momentum math. If you're starting from 0 and want to reach 10, it takes significant effort. But if you're already at 7 and need to reach 10, the journey is much easier. Laziness takes you back to 0 every single time. I once spoke with an Olympic athlete who shared something profound. She said, people think the hardest part is the competition, but the real battle is fighting laziness during training. Every day I skip training, I'm not just losing that day, I'm losing a part of what I built yesterday. Now, here's something most people never consider. Laziness compounds, just like interest. Every time you choose laziness, you're not just missing today's opportunity, you're weakening your ability to handle tomorrow's challenges. Let me introduce you to something I call the laziness trap. This is a pattern I've observed over 4 decades of studying human behavior. You see, laziness isn't just a state, it's a strategy. It's a tactic your mind uses to keep you comfortable, to keep you safe, and ultimately to keep you small. Isn't it fascinating how the mind works? Laziness tells you, let's wait until conditions are perfect. It says, let's rest a little longer. It whispers, you deserve a break. And before you realize it, you're trapped in the cycle of laziness. The fifth cost of laziness is what I call dream deflation. Dreams don't die in a single moment. They fade away gradually. They weaken every time you choose laziness over action, every time you say tomorrow instead of now. I remember meeting a man in Atlanta, 65 years old, who told me something that truly stuck with me. He said, my biggest regret isn't failing at my dreams. It's the dreams I let die because of laziness. Let me share with you something I call the Dream Protection Protocol. This is a system I developed after witnessing thousands of dreams fade away due to inaction. The first rule is simple: treat every day like a direct deposit into your dream account. Most people believe dreams are fragile, that they need to be shielded from failure. But here's what's fascinating. Dreams don't die from failure. They die from laziness. They fade from inaction, from hesitation, from the slow poison of someday. The sixth cost of laziness is what I call potential paralysis. Now, here's something profound. Potential without action isn't just wasted, it remains unknown. You'll never truly discover what you're capable of while standing still. Let me introduce you to what I call the potential paradox. The more potential you have, the more dangerous laziness becomes. The greater your capabilities, the more laziness costs you. I was teaching this principle in Vancouver when a bright young woman approached me. She said, "Everyone tells me I have incredible potential." I asked her, what's the market value of unused potential? Because here's the truth, potential without action is like having $1 million in a locked bank account. You can't use it. The seventh cost of laziness is what I call legacy limitation. Here's something most people never consider. Laziness doesn't just affect you, it impacts your legacy. It affects the people who could have been inspired by your actions, helped by your work, or transformed by your contributions. Let me share with you what I call the legacy equation. Your daily choices, X time X impact on others equals your legacy. Isn't that fascinating? Every time you choose laziness, you're not just diminishing your life, you're limiting the legacy you leave behind. I once spoke with a successful business owner in Boston. He told me, I used to think my laziness was my private business. Then I realized my children were watching, my employees were watching, my community was watching. My laziness wasn't just hurting me, it was teaching others that it's okay to settle for less. That realization changed everything. Let me introduce you to what I call the action revolution. This is what happens when you finally decide that enough is enough. When you realize laziness has robbed you of too many dreams and stolen too many opportunities. The action revolution begins with what I call the non-negotiable moment. The instant you make a decision so strong, so absolute, that laziness loses its grip on you. Isn't it fascinating how one moment can change everything? Let me walk you through the 3 stages of the action revolution. The first stage is what I call painful clarity. This is when you finally see laziness for what it truly is. Not a friend that gives you rest, but an enemy that steals your life. I once met a man in San Francisco who had his non-negotiable moment when he calculated the cost of his laziness over the past decade. When he crunched the numbers, it added up to over $1 million. Isn't that incredible? He thought he was saving energy, but in reality he was losing a fortune. The second stage is what I call strategic intolerance. Most people are far too tolerant of their own laziness. They excuse it, justify it, and even befriend it. But here's something profound. You can't defeat an enemy you're comfortable with. That's why I developed what I call the zero tolerance zone. This is a mental space where laziness has no vote, no voice, and no victory. In this zone, you don't negotiate with laziness, you eliminate it. I was teaching in Chicago when a man asked me, isn't some laziness okay? Don't we need to rest sometimes? I told him, don't confuse strategic rest with laziness. Rest is a planned part of progress. Laziness is the enemy of progress. The third stage is what I call momentum mastery. This is when action becomes your default setting, when being in motion feels more natural than standing still, when productivity becomes part of who you are. Now, let me introduce you to the 5 laws of momentum mastery. These aren't just ideas, they are iron laws that define the connection between action and results. The first law is what I call the law of initiation. Here's something fascinating. The hardest part of any action isn't doing it, it's starting. Isn't that interesting? Most people wait for motivation to start, but here's the truth. Motivation follows action, not the other way around. I was teaching this principle to a group of salespeople in Detroit when one of them said, I'm waiting to feel confident before I make my calls. I told him, confidence isn't the prerequisite for action, it's the result of action. The second law is the law of continuation. You see, starting is important, but continuing is crucial. Most people can start. That's not the real challenge. The real challenge is continuing when the excitement fades, when doubts creep in, when laziness whispers its seductive lies. Let me share with you what I call the continuation formula. It goes like this. Your ability to continue is directly proportional to your ability to make continuing non-negotiable. Isn't that fascinating? It's not about feeling like continuing. It's about making continuing your only option. The third law is the law of acceleration. Here's something profound. The longer you stay in motion, the easier it becomes to stay in motion. It's like a spacecraft breaking free from Earth's gravity. The hardest part is overcoming inertia. I was working with a businessman in Houston, and he told me something remarkable. He said, for years I thought success was about working harder. Now I realize it's about working longer, not in hours, but in consistency. The fourth law is the law of compound action. Most people understand compound interest in terms of money, but they never apply the same concept to action. Here's something fascinating. Every action you take not only produces its own results, it makes every future action more effective. I was teaching this in Toronto when a young entrepreneur asked me, how long until I see results? I told him the question isn't how long until you see results. The question isn't how long until you see results. The real question is how long can you take action without needing to see results? Isn't that interesting? The fifth and final law is what I call the law of legacy action. This may be the most profound of all. Every action you take today isn't just shaping your present, it's creating your legacy. It's setting an example that will echo through time. Let me leave you with what I call the 3 ultimate truths about laziness and action. First, Laziness isn't your friend pretending to be your enemy. It's your enemy pretending to be your friend. Every time it offers you comfort, it's really offering you decay. Every time it offers you rest, it's really offering you regret. Second, the pain of action is temporary, but the pain of laziness is permanent. The discomfort of discipline weighs ounces, but the burden of regret weighs tons. And finally, perhaps the most important truth of all, your life will never be more than your actions. Not your intentions, not your plans, not your hopes, not your dreams, your actions. So here's my challenge to you today. Don't just hear these words, act on them. Don't just think about taking action, take action. Don't just plan to overcome laziness, eliminate it completely. In the end, it's not about what you could have done or what you should have done. What truly matters is what you did, the steps you took, the laziness you defeated. Your future is waiting, your greatness is waiting, your legacy is waiting, but none of them will come to you. You must go to them. And the only way to reach them is through action. Crush your laziness. You have work to do, not tomorrow, not later, not when you feel ready, right now, because now is all you have and now is all you need to build a better life.